Masechet Ketubot, Daf Peh Tet. We're talking about what a woman needs in order to collect her ketubah. In an ideal case, if she got divorced, she would have a get and a ketubah. So she proves, I am divorced, and here is a ketubah. It's kind of like a loan document that says, here, you have to pay it to me. And normally after it's paid, then she would give him over the ketubah for him, or rip it up. And so if she has both the get and the ketubah, that's 100% proof. But what if she has only one or the other? Hotzia get ve'en imo ketubah goba ketubata. If she has only a get, she says, see, I am divorced, but she doesn't have a ketubah, nevertheless, he has to pay the ketubah. All right, we're gonna see that there were actually some places where they didn't. The custom was not to write a ketubah; it was assumed, and so for sure there, if she has a get, then he would have to pay. The Gemara will discuss what cases is talking about. Is it a place that they usually write a ketubah or not? Okay, second case is ketubah ve'en ima get. She has a ketubah, but she doesn't have a get. Now, a get also was used as kind of a proof, not only that there was that they were divorced, but when the ketubah was paid, as we'll see later on, they would tear the ketubah in a certain way and write that it was paid. Not that the get is false, but get could still be produced as proof that they're divorced, but kind of like putting a stamp on it, paid, ketubah paid. So in this case, she has only the ketubah, but not the get. He omeret avad giti. She says, I don't know where the get is. You gave me one. I don't know where it is, but here's the ketubah, and so you have to pay. Vehu omed avad shovari. He says, I paid already, and you gave me a receipt. We're going to talk about this also. Some places there was we can assume that there was a receipt or not. So he says, yes, you gave me a receipt that I paid, but I don't know where it is. So these cancel each other out, and just like she can say, well, yeah, I had a get, but I lost it. He says, I paid, and I lost the receipt. So therefore, he does not have to pay again. Or someone who's owed money, and the person who the lender produces a loan document, but he doesn't have a piruz bol, and he lent it originally before the Shavuot year, and now he's coming to collect after the Shavuot, after the end of the Shavuot year, when loans are canceled. Now he does not have a piruz bol. Piruz bol would be a document that would allow someone to collect a loan even through the Shavuot year. So the borrower is going to come and claim, hey, Shavuot passed, and therefore my loan was canceled, so I don't have to pay. Do you have a piruz bol? And the guy says, well, I did write a piruz bol, but I lost it, so therefore you still have to pay me. He says, prove that you wrote a piruz bol. I don't see one. So in both of these cases, the people don't have to pay. The husband does not have to pay because she cannot produce a get, and the borrower does not have to pay because he cannot produce a piruz bol. All that is Tanakama. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer mina sakana ve'elach isha goba ketubata shelo beget ubal chov gobe shelo bepiruz bol. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says that law before we just saw is usually true, but from the time of danger, this could have been the Hadrianic persecution, some persecution where the government said that Jews are not allowed to fulfill mitzvot. And since they can't do that, they can't have documents around that prove that they fulfilled mitzvah. And so therefore, although they would write a get if they needed to get divorced, they would not hold on to it. They would tear it up and get rid of it right away because it was dangerous. If someone found it, they could prove, oh, look, see, they're doing mitzvot. Or a piruz bol, they had to, even if they wrote it, they would not hold on to it to get rid of the evidence against the Romans that they were keeping Jewish law. So from that time on, then we cannot expect a woman to hold on to her get, and therefore Isha goba ketubata shel get, she can collect her ketubah with, even if she has only the ketubah document and not the get. And similarly, the lender can collect even right through the Shavuot year, even if he doesn't have the piruz bol, as long as he says that he wrote one. he doesn't have to produce it, and he can collect the loan. Okay, good. So now we're going to analyze the first case, and we're going to infer from it, Shema Minaha Kotvin Shobad. This must mean, the first case, remember, is where she produces a get only, and she doesn't have a ketubah. She can still collect it. Now, how come we don't worry about the fact that maybe she's hiding the ketubah, or she'll find it later, and then she'll go and collect again, right? She'll collect once with the get, and maybe she'll collect again with the ketubah. How come we're not worried about such a case? So we answer, it must be that that we agree with the opinion. There's machloket about this. We must agree with the opinion that we force the one who's paying to write to take a receipt and keep the receipt, and he has the responsibility. This husband in this case would have the responsibility to hold on to the receipt, and therefore, if he does not have the receipt, he have to pay again. So that's why we don't worry. After all, if it's in a place that we don't write receipts and we don't give the husband the responsibility of keeping the receipts, then he'll have a claim. He says, "Listen, I don't need to keep receipts my whole life. It's a big pain, right? Imagine if everybody you paid can come and collect again, and you have to prove that you're already paid because you have to keep all the receipts, and if you lose the receipt, then you have to pay again, right? That would be too onerous." That is one opinion. If we do follow that opinion that a person is not responsible for keeping receipts, then she comes and collects with a get. Then she may come later and produce her ketubah in a different court, and then she will be able to collect a second time with it. So therefore, it must be that we follow the opinion that when he pays with a get, she will write him a receipt, and he needs to hold on to that receipt. And that's how he will be protected from fraud, from paying again. We should note that even though the second clause of the Mishnah said that if you produce a ketuvah only without a get, he does not have to pay, that's only true while the husband is alive and she's claiming that they were divorced. But after the husband dies, then certainly she can collect her ketuvah with only the ketuvah. She doesn't need a get. They were not divorced. She can collect a get. She can collect her ketuvah in two ways, whether they're divorced or he dies first. So that's what we're worried about. If we allow her to collect the ketuvah with only the get, then after he dies, she will be able to collect again with the ketuvah. So how are we going to protect him against that? It must be that we assume that she writes him a receipt, and it's his responsibility to hold on to that receipt forever. But this is a problem. We don't want to say that because this is the minority opinion, it's a rejected opinion elsewhere, that husbands have to keep a receipt, or any borrowers have to keep the receipt forever. So we're going to have two answers. Amarav, b'makom she'en kotvin ketubah askinan. In fact, this Mishnah is talking about a place where there is the custom not to write a ketubah. The ketubah is implicit. People will get married without writing ketubah, and then should the husband die, so she'll come and say, "Hey, look, my husband died," and then the bet din will award her a ketuvah. Or if they're divorced, he'll give her a get, and she'll bring the get and say, "Hey, look, he has to pay a ketuvah because here's the get," and he'll pay the ketuvah, and then they stamp the ketuvah as paid, and that's why there is no ketuvah. So we do not have to worry that she's going to collect again. Okay, so Rav has to limit our Mishnah to a place where they don't actually write the ketubah. It's assumed. Fine. Ushmuel amar af b'makom shekotvin ketubah. Shmuel says, I can explain this Mishnah even in a place where they write a ketubah. And he's still not going to say that we require a husband to hold on to a receipt forever. Shmuel kotvin shovad, right? So according to Shmuel, does he have to write a receipt? That's what we were trying to get out of. We say no, we don't have to say that. Amarav Anan the Didim Sheli Mineh de Moshe Shemuel. Rav Anan says that Shemuel explained to him what his approach is. B'makom she'en kotbin. So Shemuel thinks it can be a place where they don't write or the place they do write. Either way, he can explain the Mishnah. If it's talking about if there's a place where they don't usually write a ketuvah, then she produces the get, so he writes the get. If he says v'amar katavti, if he says I know we're in a place where we don't usually write a get, but I wrote her one anyway. I wanted to have for the pictures. I wanted to show that I have a ketubah signing ceremony. I wanted to hang one up in my house. Whatever reason, he decided he's going to write a ketubah anyway. Then alav lehavir ayah. Then he has to bring a proof that he did in fact write a ketubah. He has to bring the pictures from the wedding day when they signed the ketubah. He has to bring witnesses that said, yeah, we saw that there was a ketubah. And if he can prove that he did give her a ketubah, then he won't have to pay until she produces the get and the ketubah to protect him from having to pay twice. So that's one possibility. B'makom shekotvin, or Shmuel says, I can explain this Mishnah in a place where they usually do write a ketubah. V'amra lo katav li aleh le'avida ayah. But even though most people have a ketubah in that place, she says, he never wrote a ketubah for me. I'm coming with my get only, because I don't have a ketubah. And she proves that there was no ketubah, right? She'll bring witnesses that said, look, we were there, we saw that they did the marriage and there was no ketubah at all. In that case, also, we don't have to worry that she's going to collect twice, because she proved that there is no ketubah, so she can collect only just with the get. Okay, good. So Shmuel can also, has to limit the Mishnah in other ways, but he can explain the Mishnah even in a place where they do usually write a ketubah. But she said that in this case he did not write a ketubah. Okay, va'af Rav hadarbe. Now Rav, whose answer was perfectly fine, actually changed his mind and gave a different answer. Damar Rav. Ben b'makom shekotvin, ben makom she'en kotvin. Perhaps Rav did not want to be limited only to a place where they don't write a ketubah. So he says, I also can explain the Mishnah in all places, whether they usually write a ketubah or where they usually do not write a ketubah. But unlike Shemuel, I have a different way of applying it. Get gova ikar, ketubah gova tosefet, v'chol haroseh le'ashiv yavo v'yashiv. Here's how it works. When she produces the get, she can get paid the basic 200. Let's say, assume it's a betula. When she produces the ketubah, then she gets the extra. Let's say the extra is 1,000. And so each document is actually being used for separate amounts. And so there's no possibility that she will double collect, because there's only one ketubah, there's only one get, so she'll get the get to 200, then she'll get the 1,000, but she'll need both if she wants to collect everything. Now, Rav seems to know that this is a surprising answer, because we've never seen this before, that you need two different documents to collect, and we're going to have a lot of questions to Rav. So Rav invites anyone who has a question, come and I will answer your question. Okay, well, we do have a few challenges to Rav. Here's the first one. Tenan, this first challenge is from the second clause of the Mishnah. Our Mishnah that says ketubah ven ima get. If she has only ketubah and no get, he omeret abad giti. I don't know where the get is, but I have the ketubah, so pay me. V'omer abad shovad. He says I paid already, and you even gave me a receipt, so I lost my receipt. So just like you can claim you lost the get, I can claim I lost the receipt, and I'm not paying. Or someone who has a loan document says, pay me based on this loan document, even though it's past the 7th year, and I don't have my pros bol, I lost it. Both of these people do not have to pay. Now, let's analyze this. Bishlama lishmoel mukila b'makom she'en kotvin ve'amar katavti damidan le aitera ayah. We can understand this clause, the entire Mishnah, based on Shemuel. He says we're talking about a case where we do not usually write a ketuvah. But it's a particular case, he says, I did write a ketuvah, and so we tell him you have to bring a proof that you wrote a ketuvah, and then you won't have to pay. If she has the get only, that in the first clause she has the get only, and he proves that he wrote a ketubah and she is not producing it, then he doesn't have to pay. And if he does not bring a proof that he wrote a ketubah, and we're living in a place where we usually don't write a ketubah, so she produces a get, that's sufficient. So we said, tell him, go and pay it. Right, so that is totally fine. We can explain the Mishnah according to Shemuel. Ela lirav Nihidi ikad lagabya tosefet mihatigbe. But according to Rav, he just said in his second answer that the get with the get you collect the 200, and the ketuvah you collect the rest of it, the additional amount. So according to Rav, when in the second case where she has a ketuvah but not the get, why would you say he doesn't have to pay? I understand he doesn't have to pay the basic 200 because she doesn't have a get in the second clause of the Mishnah, but she does have a ketuvah. And Rav, you said that the ketuvah alone will make him pay the additional sum. So why doesn't he have to pay that? Amar Rav Yosef, hacha b'mayaskinan kishe'en sham ede gerushin migo deyachol lememar lo gerashtiha. So Rav Yosef is going to defend Rav's interpretation and say that our Mishnah is talking about a case where there are no witnesses to say that they were even divorced. So all the husband is alive. She comes to court and says, "Here's my ketuvah. We were divorced. I want payment. Where's your get? I don't have the get. Do you have witnesses that you were divorced? No, I don't have witnesses." She has no proof that there was even a divorce. So we can apply a migo for him. Migo the husband can come and say, "I never divorced her. I'm not going to pay a ketuvah. There was never a divorce." Since we would believe him for that, because she has no proof that there was divorce. Therefore, he's also believed to say, "Yes, indeed, I did divorce her, but I already paid the ketubah." Since he would be believed anyway, so we believe him when he says that he already paid. And that's the reason, according to Rav, why he doesn't have to pay, not the 200, because she doesn't have a get, and not even the tosefet, the added 1,000 zuz, because he has a migo. She cannot prove that they were even divorced. Okay, now another challenge to Rav. The last clause of the Mishnah says, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer, min hasakana ve'elach isha go ba ketubata, shelo beget, u'bal chov shelo bepiros bol. So Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, after the persecution, when people did not keep their religious documents anymore, then a woman can collect the ketuvah even without a get, and a lender can collect also without a piros bol. Now, b'diika de gerushin askinan, deileka de gerushin b'may gabya. Now, surely this statement of Rashbag has to be talking about where there are witnesses that for a divorce, because if there's no witnesses to divorce, then how is she collecting anything? She comes with a ketuvah. We're talking about the second clause here. She comes with a ketuvah. Rashbag is talking about the same case as the second clause, where she brings a ketuvah, but she has no get, right? That because they destroy all religious documents, and if she has no get and she has no witnesses, so what claim is she making to even say that she is divorced, right? If he says we weren't divorced, we wouldn't believe her. Rather, it must be talking about a case where we do have witnesses. And if Rashbag is talking about a case where there are witnesses to the divorce, then so too the Tanakama is talking about the very same case. So sorry, but Rav Yosef, we cannot accept your okimta. We can answer it. Ela kula Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel hi v'chasura v'chikatani. So we have to add a couple of words into the Mishnah, and we're going to explain that. In fact, the entire Mishnah is the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, and here's how we're going to read it. Hare elu lo yipareu. In that second clause, when she has a ketubah but not a get, he does not have to pay. Now, when is that true? When there are no witnesses, because she has no witnesses that they were divorced. She has no get, so therefore she has no claim, and he does not have to pay. He could make a migo and say, "I paid." Aval yesh sham aidei gerushin gavya tosefet. But if there are witnesses that they're divorced and she has a ketubah, then she can collect. Not the 200 because she doesn't have a get, but she can collect the added amount, the 1,000, and that would be in accordance with Rav. Ve'ikad, what about the main part? Imepekal gita gabya. If she has a get, she can get the 200. Ilama pekal gita la gabya. If she doesn't have the get, then she cannot collect 200. Oh, good. Ve'umina sakana ve'elach. And from the time of danger and onward, afal gav de lama pekal gita gabya. Even if she does not have the get, she can collect the basic 200 amount and the added amount with the ketubah alone, because in those cases she cannot be expected to hold on to the get. It's too dangerous. As how do we know that? Rabban Shimon Gamliel omer misakana ve'elach isha go ba'ketubata shelo beget u'ba'al chob shelo bepiros bol. Rashbag says after the time of danger, she can collect the entire amount with a ketubah. And even if she doesn't have a get, and a lender can collect the entire amount without a piros bol, because he can't be expected to collect it. There's no machloket in the Mishnah. It's all the opinion of Rashbag. And so we can uphold the Ukimta of Rav Yosef, and that's how we answer the question against Rav. All right, we're not done asking questions about Rav. Remember Rav again, who said that you collect the 200 with the get and the additional sum with the ketubah. Amri le Rav Kana v'Rav Aseh le Rav. Rav Kana and Rav Aseh are double teaming up against Rav and ask him, Lididach damart get kova ikar. According to you, you say you need a get to collect the basic 200 amount. Almana mina nisuin b'may gabya. What if you have a widow? She was not divorced, so she never receives a get. So first we're going to ask about almana min nisuin. Then we're going to ask a separate question about almana min erusin. We'll see why. So how will she, an almanah, collect her 200? All she has is the ketubah that she still has from the time she was married, and her husband is dead right here. She has no get. And the answer is, be'adeh mita, when she brings witnesses that her husband died. So the witnesses will say, the husband died, she gets the 200. She produces the ketubah, she gets the added 1,000 amount. Fine. Wait a second. Why should we allow that? Maybe the husband did in fact divorce her and gave her a get, and she has the get, and she collected her 200, and now after the husband died, she brings the witnesses that the husband died and gets another 200. So maybe we shouldn't allow it. No, we're talking about a case where she's been living with her husband the entire time, right up until he died, right? And he died at home. And so there was never a time when they were separated and never a time when they were divorced. So that's why we will rely on that to say that she did not receive a get. She did not collect the 200. She did not advance to go, and she can then collect because her husband has died and she has witnesses. Hold on. How do you know? Even if they were living together the whole time, maybe right before he died, he decided to divorce her. I don't know, for whatever reason. He got into a really big fight. Actually, it could happen. He doesn't want her to have to fall to Yibum. And so maybe, even though they weren't separated, he did give her a get. And so we should worry about that and not allow her to collect based on witnesses to his death. And the answer to that is, if he divorced her without publicizing it, without letting anybody know, and so now she has a get, and she's going to collect with that, and then possibly collect again with the witnesses that he died, then he is the one that's responsible. He's paying her extra by doing that. If he really wanted to make sure that she didn't collect double, and no one knew they were divorced because they're living together the whole time, he should have informed someone, have some kind of proof that she got her get, she'll collect the 200 with that, and that way she would not be able to double collect. Fine. Rav answered that question. But how is he going to answer the next one? Almana mina erusin b'may gavya. How about someone who's widowed during Kiddushin? So now they were never living together. So the fact that they're you can't look to the fact that they're living together to say that they were never divorced. So in this case, maybe she. So how will she ever collect the 200? She has no get. So the answer again is be'adeh mita. We have she has witnesses. Look, I was engaged to this man. Here are witnesses that he died. I want to collect the 200. And she has a ketubah also, and she'll get the full payment. Wait a second. How do you know that while they were engaged, maybe he gave her a get, and then he also died. And now she's going to take the get, collect 200, bring the witnesses that he died, and collect another 200. And in this case, you can answer like we did before, that the fact that they're living together shows that they weren't divorced. They're not living together because there's only kiddushin. So what about that case? Rather, in a case where it's impossible otherwise, we will have her write a receipt, and the man will have to hold on to the receipt. So even though this whole time Rav and Shmuel were trying to get away from the opinion that say that we require the man to hold on to a receipt, and therefore we're going to allow her to get paid when she brings even weak proof, because and we don't have to worry about her claiming twice, because he has the responsibility to hold the receipt. Even though we're trying to get away from that opinion, in some cases like this one, there's no other way around it. So then in that case, yes, we will require him to hold on to a receipt. Because if you don't say that, there are some cases where you require a receipt. Then the witnesses regarding the death themselves. Anytime a woman is widowed, we can worry. Maybe she'll bring the witnesses to one bet din. Oh, see, here's witnesses. My husband died. I'm going to collect my ketuvah, and then she'll go to another bet din and with the same witnesses and collect again. Rather, in the case where we have no other way of proving it, we will require the man to hold on to a receipt. We don't have to do that in the case of divorce, because the divorce paper itself, we can tear it up, mark it. But in these cases, yes, we will require a receipt. Good. Amar le'amor kashisha beret Rav Chisda leRav Asher. Almana min ha'erusin minelan de'it la ketubah. Now, this question just now, we were assuming that when a woman is only engaged and the husband dies before marriage, that there is a ketuvah payment. How do you know that? How do you know that almana min erusin even gets a ketuvah? Maybe a ketuvah is only for someone who's married, fully married. So maybe you'll prove it from the following Mishnah that we had earlier in Ketubot. Nit almela or nit kadisha, if a woman is widowed or divorced, ben mina erusin, ben mina nisuin, whether it's after kiddushin or after nisuin, govatakol, she collects everything. So there you go. It says she's widowed, and after erusin, she still collects. So that seems like a good proof. But hold on, Dilma de Katavla, maybe that's where he didn't have to, but he decided to write her a ketubah. So this whole discussion must be talking about a case where they don't usually write a ketubah. So can we assume that responsibility anyway? So for sure, after nisuin, even if you didn't write a ketubah, that it's a tanai betin, it's a condition of all marriages that the betin imposes. So maybe this Mishnah here is talking about a case where the husband, decided to write her, even though he doesn't have to. But in the case where he doesn't write anything, and she is a widow after kiddushin, then he would not have to pay. So there's no proof from here. Now, if you're going to say, well, if he actually wrote a ketubah, and now then what's this Mishnah teaching? Of course he has to pay. If anyone can obligate themselves for anything. So then what is it? It will be obvious. No, this Mishnah will still be giving us an important chidush, that we should reject Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who says that when the man writes the ketubah for his bride-to-be, they would write it at the time of Erusin, way before. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says he has in mind that this will only take effect after Nisuin. He doesn't want to have to pay her unless they're fully married. That's what Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, and this Mishnah is coming to teach us that when he writes a ketubah, he still only has to pay after he still only has to pay after the he does have to pay even after the Erusin only, right? Against the Bielas ben Azariah, he has to pay, who said only after the Nisuin. So according to this, even if they only had Kiddushin and he died, he still has to pay, and that's an important chidush to know. But it could in fact be talking about only where he wrote it, and if he didn't write it, then maybe he wouldn't have to pay. So we don't have any proof from this Mishnah that a man would have to pay ketubah even if he didn't write it. And we can even be more exacting and infer from the exact language that we're talking about a case where he decided on his own accord to write a ketubah even though he didn't have to. Because the Mishnah says Govat HaKol, he collects everything. What do you mean everything? If he actually wrote the document, Mishum Hachi Govat HaKol. Well, that's why she can collect the entire amount, the base sum, and the added amount using this ketubah. But if he didn't write anything, and we're just assuming it as a Tanai Betin, my Gobat HaKol, what do you mean, collect everything? She would only get the basic amount of 100 or 200, right? Because if there's no document, and we're just relying on the general enactment by the court that every husband has to pay a ketubah, well, that basic enactment was only regarding the basic amount of 200. So you just, you wouldn't write Gobat HaKol. Gobat HaKol implies that she's collecting more than that, and she only collects more than that if there's an actual written document. So there's no proof from there. Ve'ela. So now we're gonna find a better proof that to show that yes, in fact, an almana from Erusin still deserves a ketubah payment even if it's not written. אלא מדתנא רב חייא בר אבין, אשתו ארוסה לא אונן ולא מתטמא לה, וכן היא לא אוננת ולא מתטמאה לו, מתה אינו יורשה, מתו גובה כתובתה. Here we go. If he has a wife and they were only engaged, and then she dies, he does not follow the laws of aninut. If he's a kohen, he cannot become tameh for her because they're no nisuin. And similarly, if he dies, she does not observe the laws of aninut, and she need not become tameh for him. It doesn't matter. She's allowed to become tameh if she's a kohen, but let's say it's like Pesach time, and then she doesn't want to become tameh because she wants to eat korban Pesach or something. So she doesn't need to. Meta, if she dies, he does not inherit her because Yerusha did not kick in. Metu, if he dies, she collects the ketuvah. There you go, right? It says that there only have kiddushin, and he dies, and she still collects the ketuvah. So now we ask, how do you know what case? Maybe this is a case where he actually wrote her a ketuvah, and that's why he has to pay one. But if he didn't write, he wouldn't have to. So there's no proof from here. And if you ask, well, if he wrote one, then was obviously he has to pay if he wrote a ketubah. What would be the chidush? And the chidush could still be meta and oyosha isterich aleh. We still need this entire baraita. Because for the other clause here that says if she dies, he does not inherit her, and so that's why we have this halacha is taught to us. But there's actually no proof necessarily that it's a case where he didn't write a ketubah. So in the end, we do not have a proof. So we move on to another question against Rav. Amar le Rav Nachman le Rav Huna. Lerav de Amar get gova ikar. According to Rav, who says that when you produce a get, she can collect only the base amount of 200. This is a question of Rav Nachman to Rav Huna. Lechush dilma mapeka gita behabedina vegabya vehadra mapeka bedina acharina vegabya. Then how come we don't worry that she's going to come to one betin with her get and collect the 200, and then go to another betin and collect another 200? And if you say, no, we take the get and we tear it. We tear it up so she cannot use it again. But then she'll come and say, no, don't tear it up. I need it to remarry. When she wants to come remarry, people will say, were you ever married before? She'll say yes. So then, well, you divorced? She'll say yes. But okay, prove that you were divorced. No one's going to allow her to remarry without a get. So she says, don't rip it up. So how could we rip it up? And the answer is that kar'inan le v'chatminan agabe gita denan kera'anun hi כרענוהי לאו משום דגיתה פסול הוא, אלא דלה תהדר ותגבה בזמנה אחרינה. So rather what we do is we do rip up the get, and we write on it, on the back, after it's torn, this get, we tore it up. Not because there's anything wrong with it. It's a good get. They really are divorced. But rather, we want to make sure that she does not go and collect their 200 with it again. And so she can kind of hold on to the torn get as proof that she was, and with the note on it, as proof that she was divorced, and she still will not be able to use it again. Nowadays, anytime someone gets a divorce and they go to the Bet Din writes a get and he hands it to her. The Bet Din then tears it up. They tear up and destroy every get and get rid of it. And then they simply write for the woman a receipt, a document that says, this Bet Din, we were here and we adjudicated the divorce. And she can use that. She does use that to prove that she is divorced, but this is in fact the halacha that we tear up any get. We do that for another reason, which is that we don't want anyone ever to find a mistake in the get. And they'll say, look, this name is spelled wrong. Oh, you were never divorced. Your remarriage is not a good remarriage. Your children are mamzerim. And so therefore, it's much safer to simply destroy the get and write a receipt. We now come to the next Mishnah. Shene gitin ushte ketubot goba shete ketubot. If a woman produces 2 gets and 2 ketuvas, how could that be? The dates would have to be all in order. It should have to be that there's a ketuvah, followed by a get, followed by a second ketuvah, followed by a second get. And the dates are all sequential like that. That would mean that she got married, has a ketubah, got divorced, so she deserves to get paid. Then she remarries the very same guy, and he writes another ketubah. That means he wants to write a second ketubah, and they get divorced again. He has to pay both of them. Oh, good. Now, shetek ketubot veget ehad. Now, what if there's a case where she produces 2 ketuvahs, but only 1 get? So then, on all these following cases, he only pays once. So in this case, it would be, for example, he wrote the dates on it are ketuvah, second ketuvah, and then the get. In that case, we assume that he wanted to replace the first ketuvah with the second ketuvah. He wanted to pay her more or something like that. Or ketubah ushne gitin. Or if you have 1 ketubah, and that's the earliest document, followed by 2 gets, that would mean that they married, divorced. They decided to remarry. When a man remarries, sometimes he doesn't have to write a new ketubah. He may say, I'm going to remarry on the basis of the same conditions, the same ketubah as the first marriage. And so he only has to pay 1, even though there was 2 divorces. Or ketubah veget umita, ena gova ela ketubah achat. Or if there's a ketubah, there's a get, and there's witnesses that he died. And then she may try to get paid twice by saying, oh yeah, we had a ketubah, we got divorced, and then we remarried, and then he died. In all these cases, she can't get paid twice, even though there's 2 of one of these documents, or there's get and mitah. In all these cases, even though there are 2 marriages, she got remarried to the same guy twice, she only gets paid once. Why? When a person divorces his wife and then remarries, he has in mind he's going to continue the marriage of the first one, of the first ketubah. Unless, in the first case here, where there are actually 2 ketubot, and each of the ketubot are dated to be one before the first get and one after the first get, then he in fact would have to pay twice. Good. Now, in this case here, where there's 2 ketubot and 1 get, she only gets paid one of them. So which one? She can choose whichever ketubah she wants to get paid. Now, normally she would pick the one with the higher amount, but not always. It could be that the later one has the bigger amount, but the earlier one has a lien on land from an earlier date. And so if the guy has limited funds and he sold some of his land to others, then the later ketuvah with the bigger amount won't help her because she won't be able to collect it. It would be preferable for her to use the earlier one, even though it's a lesser amount, because then she can for sure collect it from that land. But she can choose either one that she wants. Now we ask, Lema tevet yubtad Rav Nachman amar Shemuel, Damar Rav Nachman amar Shemuel, shetesh shene shetarot, hayosim bezeh achar zeh, bitel sheni et harishon. This conclusion here that she can use anyone she wants is a refutation of the statement of Rav Nachman, name of Shemuel, who said that anytime you have two documents that are identical and one comes after the other, we assume that the second one canceled the first. For example, you have two loan documents, one from last week and one from yesterday, and they are both have a lien on the same land, same two people. Then we assume that they had one document and then they changed their mind and they reset it, and so the second one cancels the first. And how come over here? But over here we don't assume that you have to use the second ketubah. She can pick whichever one she wants. So it must be that our Mishnah is a refutation of Shemuel. How will they answer it? Well, they can answer Lav itmad Allah Amar Papa umoded Rav Nachman di Yosef bedikla letosefet ketabe hachaname bedosef la. No, Rav Papa said about that even Rav Nachman would agree that the second one does not cancel the first if they're not exactly identical. If the second one has something added, even if you added one palm tree, right? I'm gonna include this one palm tree in the sale of this land. Then the second document of sale is not canceling the first one, but rather adding something else to it. But the conditions of the first will still continue. And so here too, we're talking about a case where there was one ketuvah. Then the second ketuvah, he adds another 100 zuz. He wants to show how much he loves her, adds another 100 zuz. He can do that. And it does not cancel the first. The first is also in effect. The lien of the first document remains, and therefore she can use that. Or she can use the second document that has the extra tree, or whatever extra it has, even though the second one will have a later lien. Okay, tenora banan hosia get uchtuba umita im get kodem leketubah gova shete ketubot ketubah kodemet laget ena kod gova ela ketubah achat. So this is a braita that's elaborating on the case where she has a get, a ketubah, and the husband has died. She has witnesses that the husband dies. So what does she collect? If the get is earlier than the ketuvah, that means she was married, she received a get, she got remarried with a second ketuvah. So therefore, she collects govashtek. She can collect two ketuvot, because evident that the second ketuvah was written for the second time she married this guy, and so she can collect twice. However, ketubah the get, if the ketubah is before the get, then only once. She can only collect one get, because that would mean that they were married with the ketubah, they got a get, and he died afterwards. So the fact that he died does not add to it. Whereas in the first case, where they have the get is earlier and then a ketubah, so she gets paid for the first marriage on the basis of the get, and she gets paid again for the second marriage on the basis of the ketuvah and the fact that he died. In the second case, she only gets paid once, because even though there's a ketubah and then the get, and even if they got remarried and then he died afterwards, nevertheless only pays one, because when someone divorces his wife and doesn't write a new ketubah, it's because he is assuming the continuation of the first ketubah, unless there is a second ketubah, then you would say that he's paying again. All right, we may as well finish the perek. So let's go one more Mishnah. Katan she'esio aviv ketuvata kayemet shalmenat ken kiyema. If there's a minor boy and his father marries him off, so since he's a minor, he's not responsible. So the father negotiates a ketubah and writes the amount of the ketubah. That ketubah is valid even when the boy grows up. He can't say, "Oh, I didn't agree to give you 1,000 zuz." Right? My father agreed. I don't want to do that. No, he has to pay, because it's based on that condition that he maintained her as a wife. The second he became an adult, he didn't say, "I don't want to pay this, I'm out." Right? He continued staying with her, so that means he agrees to it. גר שנתגיירה אשתו עמו, כתובתה קיימת, שאלמנת כן קיימה. Similarly, if you have two non-Jews, man and woman, who are married as non-Jews under whatever civil law they are under, and then they both convert. They convert together, and they remain living together. And they, when they were not Jewish, they had some kind of marriage agreement, and he said, I will pay you this certain amount. Non-Jews also have marriage agreements, and now they convert. Now, technically, once they convert, they actually have to remarry. They have to marry now under Jewish law. But if they continue living together, the first bi'ah that they have, if they have in mind this will be for a marriage, so then they are married. In such a case, he has to continue the agreement that he had before, because that's the condition upon which he maintains her as a wife. And so the fact that they remain living together means that he's continuing that. If he did not want to continue the monetary agreement that they had before, then he should have said so. He says, "Okay, listen, now we converted. I don't want to pay that same amount." And then he could have written up a new contract and gotten married based on that. But since they're continuing their marriage, by continuing the marriage, they become married under Jewish law, so then that becomes the obligation as a ketubah payment as well. Which is really a fascinating clause here. Okay, Amar Rav Huna, lo shanu ela almane matayim aval tosefet, and la Rav Huna says, when in the first case we talk about a father who married off his son, and so he wrote in the ketubah, let's say 200 plus 1,000 for tosefet. Now the kid grows up and he gets divorced. He only has to pay the 200. That's what it means almenat ken kiyama. He only has ketubah kayemet, so that means only the base amount of the ketubah kayemet, because that everyone has to agree to, but the extra 1,000 he never agreed to. He doesn't have to pay it. Rav Huna Amar afilu tosefet yesh la. Rav Yehuda says no, he has to pay the additional sum also. He continued staying in the marriage. He has to pay that. We're going to challenge Rav Yehuda. Metibe chideshu notelet ma shechideshu. Chideshu in lo chideshu la. If in a case where the minor added more, after he became an adult, he said, "You know what? My father didn't give you enough. I want to give you even more. I want to give you 10,000." So then she can collect that extra. So we can infer from here, only if he added more by himself, then he has to pay. But if he didn't add any more by himself, then he does not have to pay any extra. He can pay only the 200. And this is a proof against Rav Yehuda. No, maybe you can read this baraita as meaning that if he adds 10,000 or more on his own, then he has to pay also that amount, including, so he has to pay the 200 plus the 1,000 plus the 10,000. And so you cannot necessarily infer from here that he doesn't pay the 1,000, so Rav Yehuda is just fine. But this is not a good interpretation of the Braita, because look at the rest of the Braita. That's the part we quoted already. The continuation says, if he did not add anything when he grows up, and she's a bitula, she gets 200. If she was an almana when she first married, she only gets 100. So you see that there's no tosefet at all. So this is a rejection of Rav Yehuda. Okay, so what led Rav Yehuda to give his explanation if it contradicts this explicitly, this baraita? Rav Yehuda matnitin at aite. It was the language of the Mishnah that led him incorrectly to interpret it as he did. Hu sabar ketubata kayemet. He saw the words that her ketuvah is valid, and figure that means the entirety of the ketuvah, the base amount plus the added amount. But in fact, no, it's only referring to the base amount. That's a valid ketuvah for the 200, but the kid never agreed to pay the 1,000, and therefore he does not have to pay. Hadran alach hakotev leishto chazakim uberuchim.